Enjoy Professor Erica Ellingson.
Hi, good evening, everybody. We're going to start today with the best party in the world. Let's see if we can go. Has anyone ever been to Stonehenge? Has anyone ever been to Stonehenge on the summer solstice sunrise? It is really a scene. They take down all the barriers, they take down all the fences, and about 6,000 of your closest friends all get together and bliss out on whatever we're blissing out on to watch the sunrise at this place. This is a 5,000-year-old Neolithic monument, and it has everything to do with the sun, with the stars. We get together still every year. After 5,000 years, thousands of people come to this place to watch the sunrise in a particular part of the horizon over the Heelstone. You see it there? This is important. This is something that humans have been doing for thousands of years. We watch the sky. We take meaning from the sky. So I want to talk about what we see in the sky. Some of these sort of obvious and some of these more subtle cycles that we have been watching for pretty much as long as we've been humans. For the sun, well, this should be something that is reasonably familiar to everybody. We start off with, here's the Earth. We set out the equator so we can show the north part of the sky and the south part of the sky, and then we have the sun going around the Earth. Yeah, that always gets me into trouble. But this is as though we were earthbound observers, watching the sun in its cycle over the course of the year, going up to north in June, when it hits the northernmost part of its orbit. That we call, what do we call it? The summer solstice. Solstice says sun stands still. It says stand still. The sun gets as far north, hangs for a day or two, and then goes south. It goes south in the winter, and in December we have the winter solstice. This is the reason for the seasons, but that's also one of the primary things that people have watched around the world, to see the swing from north to south every year. Now at Stonehenge, they built this monument, this huge monument with giant, many, many tons of stones dragged from miles away to honor this cycle. You can look at that axis from the upper right to the lower left. That's the main axis of Stonehenge. Big ditches, giant stones. All of this alignment you see is pointed to where the sun is going to rise on the June solstice. And so even now today, we all go. Many of us go and we're talking didgeridoos, we're talking about chanting, ram's horns. It is really a sight. If you have a chance to go to that party, I really, really think you should do it. But what I really want to talk about today actually is the moon, because the moon also does its own cycle and its own dance. It's a little more subtle, and some of you may not have heard about this. So the moon does a north and south cycle, but because the moon moves pretty fast through the sky in its orbit around the Earth, it does that north-south thing every single month. That's kind of cool. You can start watching for that. But there's a little bit more of a subtlety here. The moon's orbit has a little extra tilt to it. Here's that same diagram. You see the Earth, the north-south part of the sky separated by the blue ring, and you can see the yellow ring is the sun's apparent path on the sky. The moon's apparent path is just tilted a mere 5 degrees, but 5 degrees makes a difference, because this is why we don't have eclipses every single month. So here we have, I want you to just sort of think, I'm one of these people who watches solstices. I see the sun going bam to the far north, bam to the far south, bam, north, south every year. Then you watch the moon, and that moon, the secondary luminary in the sky, she goes a little bit further north. Look at that. She can go a wee bit further north, on the other side a wee bit further south. The moon has different limits, different angles on that. That's kind of interesting. If you start thinking about the sun and the moon, the power play between them in the sky, well, that might mean something too. But it turns out that the geometry is even a little bit more complicated. If you want to think about times where the moon will surpass the sun, go past the limits of the sun, It turns out it doesn't happen every month because the moon's orbit twists a little bit. Take a look at that moon in that upper right. You can see now, on this time, the moon's orbit actually doesn't get that far north. And in fact, now it's not even getting as north as the sun does. So this very slow twisting cycle, we call it the regression of the nodes, or the lunar standstill cycle. It takes 18 years to go through. So imagine that you are watching the moon, and perhaps if there is some import of the moon going to an extreme position, this is something you wouldn't see every month. You wouldn't see it every year. You would have to wait 18 years to see the sort of extreme positions far north and far south. So, okay, fine. So, like, who cares? 18 years, it's subtle, whatever. It turns out Colorado has some of the evidence, best evidence, that people in ancient times actually cared about this very subtle, very long cycle of the moon. This is a place called Chimney Rock National Monument. It's down in between Pagosa and Durango. If you're going down Highway 160 between Pagosa and Durango, you may not notice the little brown sign with an arrow pointing off to the side. Take it. Next time, take it. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. It's actually a very narrow knife edge ridge with some big rocks on the end of it, but you see down on the lower right-hand side, that's an ancestral Puebloan village. There are structures there that were multiple stories high. There are kivas, ceremonial places there, in a very inaccessible place way up above the valley where all the food and the water were. So why would anyone build a place there? Well, this was an outlier of what we call the Chaco civilization. Chaco, down in New Mexico, was really a widespread, complicated set of peoples who lived in communities all through the Four Corners region for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, really, from prehistory up to about 1300 in Chaco. Their present-day descendants are the Pueblo people of Arizona and New Mexico. So in Chimney Rock, in that particular part of Colorado, people lived there for a few hundred years, around 900 to 1100. They're an outlier of the wider Chacoan civilization. And again, here's an aerial view showing the foundations of the place up at Chimney Rock. This is the view from those places. So you see those rocks sort of line up like a gun sight. It's a real interesting place. You go up there, and even though you're in the forest and the river valley at the bottom, when you get up onto the ridge, it's like you see the sky everywhere. You look down on the backs of birds. It's really a gorgeous place, and there are these two rocks up into the northeast. Now, we know the Chaco people, they watched the sky. They made calendars. They built a lot of their pueblos, a lot of their buildings and alignments, like Stonehenge, with things having to do with the sun. But it turns out with Chaco, with Chimney Rock, if you take a look at how that knife edge works, it turns out the sun never goes far enough north in order to actually rise between those two pillars. Boy, wouldn't that be stupendous? Oh yeah, just like Stonehenge, almost better. But the sun doesn't go that far north. It actually goes as far north as that little shoulder off to the right-hand side. So maybe what goes further north than the sun? The moon? It can. How often does it do that? Every 18.6 years. Does that actually work? It turns out that it does. But on seasons that last, it happens about once a month. For a season that lasts about 2 years, that repeats only every 18.6 years. Well, it's a great view. It's a beautiful thing if you happen to be up at the right time. And they built this stupendous structure up there. Were they looking at that? It turns out that if you do the tree ring dating for the buildings there, you see that in the years of the thousands to 1100s, that those buildings were built and renovated on dates related to the lunar standstill cycle. So it's really very, very possible, very likely even, that this was a moon watching place, a moon observatory, if you will, where people would gather to watch the moon rise, the same way that we gather at Stonehenge to watch the sunrise. but on this 18-year, very, very subtle cycle. So, when is that cycle going to happen again? It's happening right now. And so I have the great honor of working with a collaboration including Fisk Planetarium. Raise your hands if you're from Fisk. At the University of Colorado, the San Juan National Forest and the USDA, Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, the Chimney Rock Interpretive Association, and representatives from the 26 different tribes and pueblos who have historical and cultural ties to Chimney Rock, to try to say, how do we celebrate the moon in these days? Well, that ridge is pretty hard to get to. It's, frankly, in the dark, it's really scary up there. It's 1,000-foot cliffs on either side. We actually decided we did not want to have a 6,000-person party up there. So what do we do instead? We got a Starlink and some cameras and some intrepid people to carry things up to Chimney Rock. And last year, we just got approval this week. For this coming year, we're going to have our lunar party. So I want to invite you all to the Lunatic Party. We'll be having public celebrations at Chimney Rock National Monument, again between Pagosa Springs and Durango, on these 3 nights this fall. Remember, we got to be there on those nights, September 13th and 14th, and then again on October 11th. These are late night events. So in the September events, the moon is not going to rise until almost midnight. So we're going to have a party. We're going to dress warm. You're going to bring a blanket to sit on. And because we can't all fit up on that knife edge ridge, we're going to be doing it down at the amphitheater at the Visitor Center at Chimney Rock. If you want to come, you can get information, get a reservation for your space in the amphitheater from recreation.gov. You guys know how you do that to get your camping and your tours. Okay, you're going to do that. If you can't come all the way out to Chimney Rock, Griffith Observatory will do a live stream of the moonrise. You'll be able to see it from the warmth and comfort of your home if you can't come and join us. But our party, it may not be as big as Stonehenge's party, but we will have talks, we have live music, we'll have film, we'll have a viewing of the moonrise at Chimney Rock. So I hope we'll get to see you all there. Thank you.
All right, we have 5 minutes for questions with Dr. Ellingson. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
How many of you are coming? All right. Have we found any other sites like Chimney Rock? It's hard. There have been a bunch of places literally around the world that have been claimed, like Chimney Rock, to be places where people noted this very long cycle of the moon. It was definitely known throughout the Middle East, throughout Europe, through last 3,000 years or so, but really nailing down exact places has been very difficult. There are a couple of places in the Middle East I would say yes. Chimney Rock, with the tree ring dating, has by far the best archaeological evidence. And there's this wild place up in northern Scotland called Callanish that claims that, well, there's folk tales about the moon in its southern position coming to the earth. And an old tale from literally 300 BC saying that the moon comes into the center of the standing stones at Callanish and plays his lyre there every 18 years. So there are stories, there are tales, there are folklore, there are these little things that we grasp at to try to say, yes, have people been doing this for thousands of years on an 18-year cycle? But the thing that I learned from going to Stonehenge is that 6,000 people at Stonehenge are not standing in exactly the right place to take that picture that I took. Why are we there, though? We are there because the skies still hold a real sacred place in our hearts. And so honoring the sun, honoring the moon, no matter how we do it, whether we do it from our backyard or whether we travel across the world to do it, this is something that retains its importance to us as humans.
Do you have any more questions? Yes.
is there any evidence that you could use this as an eclipse calculator? That 18.6-year cycle is kind of teeter-tottery related to the eclipse cycle because it's a sun-moon thing. It turns out that if you were clever and had this geometric model in your head about how it works, you could say, yeah, I could calculate when I'm likely to get lunar eclipses on this model. There's no evidence that the ancestral Pueblo people had that sort of model in their brains when they watched what the skies were doing, or that they made eclipse predictions from it. And so it's something we can do with the geometry that we tend to look at and try to interpret the sky, but no evidence that ancient people in that's part of the world were doing that.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, so the question is, can't you make everything line up? All you have to do is walk over here and there and get the moon in the right place. The thing with Chimney Rock is if you walk too far to the left to get the moon or the sun in the right place, you fall off the cliff. And so literally the place where we set up our cameras is between a 1,000-foot cliff and another 1,000-foot cliff. And in the middle of the night, in the dark. I go up there and I'm laying a tarp down, and if I get off the tarp, I'm dead, I know. So again, it is a really remarkable piece of geology that somehow also led us to look up into the skies.
All right, let's hear it for Dr. Ellingson. Thank you so much.